Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is on the exterior of the car. You have many different lights, and you want to be sure all the bulbs are functioning correctly, that they're lit, and that there's not cracked, lenses aren't cracked, or they're yellow. So what we'll do first is we'll have Tony turn the lights on, and I'll show you each type of bulb you want to look at as you do a walk around on your car. We'll start in the front. Okay, so this is called a headlight assembly. They're made out of plastic, and there's several bulbs in here. There's an amber bulb. That's a law that has to be a different color. That's an amber or yellow bulb. That's a parking light bulb, and that's a side marker light. And then you have a low beam headlight. And Tony, would you flick it on to high beam? So you got a high and a low. So you want to check to make sure all the lighting is on each side. Go to both sides of the car. And you also want to make sure there's no cracks, or a rock has hit it and split it, or a bullseye type crack. And the other thing you want to look for is to make sure there's no water or moisture inside the light. These are sealed. And if the moisture or water gets in there, they get foggy in there, and then that moisture burns out the bulbs. If there is moisture or condensation in there, the only solution is to replace them because they're made out of plastic, and they do have a service life. They used to be glass, and modern cars are all plastic. So that is actually a replaceable part that many people replace. Tony, do you have an older one that we had to replace? On this particular lens, this is on a different vehicle, but just as a sample, it's kind of a yellow and it's crazed looking. What that does, it restricts the light from coming out, and it presents a safety problem. When it gets like this, you have two options. There's a treatment that you can put on here, and it's a chemical, and it's a light sanding, and it can bring it back to life, bring it to more clear. Usually that works fairly well. It's cost effective, it's economically friendly compared to replacing these. These can be very expensive. They do build them aftermarket now, so you don't have to go to the dealer, so that helps a little bit, so they're a little less expensive. But as they get yellow like this, it's hard to see at night, and it becomes a safety hazard. So if your lenses are starting to look yellowed, or there's moisture inside, either get them treated, or if there is moisture inside, there is no treatment for that, you just have to replace it. Another option you can do, you can replace the bulbs with a higher voltage or different style lighting. They make plug-in, so you can upgrade from a halogen to either an LED light, and they have different light scales where they have they're more of a white light, and that can help you see at night, or when the roads are wet, when there's a lot of reflection. It's a very good visual aid. Another thing you want to check for is the blinkers. You have 4 blinkers, 2 in the front and 2 in the rear. And you have to have somebody in the car turn it on. Okay, so you see that bulb actually has 2 functions. It's got 2 elements in there. The one, it was glowing as a parking light, and the other one is the actual turn signal light. And then go to the other side, and you want to make sure they're functioning. So basically, you've got a side marker, a parking light, blinker bulb, and a headlight. Those are all the bulbs that are contained in that one assembly. So that's all we're looking for up front, and then we'll go to the back of the car next. Okay, we did the front of the car. Now we're going to the back of the car, and we're going to address the back lighting and what to look for, and some tips on the back lighting. You have 2 tail light assemblies. You have a driver's side, passenger side tail light assembly, and you've got a brake light here that's called a third brake light. What that does is that alerts a driver so you can see the brake lights better. They're usually LEDs, and usually if one of these sections, would you step on the brake a second? If one of these sections go out on these, it's usually the whole assembly has to get replaced. It's not just, you can't replace these individual LED bulbs. The whole piece has to be replaced. Again, when you look at these, what you're looking for cracks, moisture, splits, just to be sure everything looks sound. There's no moisture and there's no breaks on it. And the other thing you're looking for is you have 2 license plate bulbs. Can you release the hood, the trunk, please? Okay, so underneath here you have 2 bulbs that light up your license plate. That's most cars have both 2 of them, and some of them have just 1 in the middle. So you want to be sure to always look at these, because the police can stop you for any of these lights being out, and you definitely don't want to get stopped for just a light bulb issue. So basically, what we're looking for, you've got parking lights. These are parking lights. That's a parking light. And then you step on the brakes. And then if you notice that the back bulbs are also have 2 filaments in there, that means that you have a regular bulb. If you can zoom in on that, you can see it very good here. There's 2 filaments on the same bulb. So one bulb does 2 things. One bulb has the parking light, and it also has the brake light. Let go of the brake lights. On, off. Okay, so that one bulb actually controls 2 things. Sometimes you may have a parking light working, but the brake light will be working, and so the bulb has to be replaced. The whole bulb has to be replaced. The other thing you're looking for back here is your reverse lights. When you put your car in reverse, this clear section here, those lights come on, and you want to be sure your reverse lights are working. That's so when you're backing up, you can see what's behind you. That's really helpful when you have a backup camera. So you can visually see. Usually there's a backup camera here, and that'll light up your area for when you're backing up. So you definitely want to have all your bulbs in the back checked. Okay, and then we also want to check our blinkers. Left blinker. If you notice, the left blinker is amber, the right blinker, and the right blinker. So those are all the lights in the back that you want to check. The important ones are mainly the brake lights. Those are very critical. But do a walk around. It's a good idea to check your lighting once a month. And you'll be surprised how many people have light bulbs out and they don't even know it, especially on their license plates. Real easy to replace. Most do-it-yourselfers can replace it. You can get the bulbs at the local auto parts store and get your car lit up like it was designed to be. Okay, the next area that's of extreme importance on a car is your tires. Your tires provide your traction. They help with braking. They're very critical, and they're very important to the overall performance of your car. So we've racked the car, and you can do this also on the ground. We just racked it just for demonstration purposes. What you want to do when you look at your tire, you want to just make sure there's no cuts or no splits, like if you hit a curb or a thick pothole. You want to make sure that there's no damage to the side of the tire. And then what you also want to do is just kind of rub your hand over the tire and make sure that it's not the tread is not unevenly worn. It's nice and smooth across. Some things you look for on a tread is if they're worn on the edge. You may have an alignment issue or an inflation issue, and you want to be sure you have enough tread. That's another thing you want to look for. And the other thing you want to look for is to make sure you don't have any nails or pieces of glass or something in the tire. Because that would make the tire lose air, and you can tell how much air is in the tire by a gauge. Either you can have a little handheld gauge, or some cars have pressure indicators, which most cars have in this day and age. Tony, do you have the tire pressure gauge? Okay, so how you put air in the tires? You have a valve, and on that valve, this one here is a tire pressure monitoring valve. It's special. It's not like a rubber valve. It's a metal valve, and it's connected to an electronic device that tells how much pressure is in the tires, and it sends out a signal. And there's an antenna somewhere underneath the hood area that picks up all the tires' signals, and it gives us a signal to the computer and lets it know how much pressure is in each tire. That was a regulation that was developed probably 10 years ago by NHTSA, which is a department in the government for safety. So, because it makes the car tell you when your tire's low on air pressure. You'll see on the side of a tire a couple things. It'll tell you the maximum amount of air to put in a tire, but that's not necessarily what you put in your car on your tire. Real important to look on the door jamb, and we'll after we get the car off the rack, I'll show you where it's at. That'll tell you the exact amount of air pressure to put in the car. Every car's got a sticker. It tells you the size of the tire that it was built for, this type of tire, and it'll tell you the air pressure. Most cars, the air pressure is the same front and rear. Some cars, it's different. Pickup trucks, if you have a load in the back, it'll tell you to put more air in the back tires for the extra load. Some cars with engines in the back, they require more air in the back tires than the front tires, but the majority of cars are the same front and rear. On average, it's about 35 pounds is about what most cars have. So how you check it, you can get one of these gauges at any auto parts store, Walmart, any mass-produced stores. You take it and you just push it up against it, and it tells you in PSI, or pounds per square inch, how much air is in the tire. And then you can, if you've got too much air, you can let a little air out on the back of the gauge. It's got a little tab on there, and that lets air out of the tires. And if you had to add air to a tire, you have to bring it to a service center that's got an air compressor, or some people have a compressor at home, a little compressor. You can get them to plug in your cigarette lighter or your power port. They're real handy to have, those little 12-volt compressors, and this way you can check them in your own garage. If you're in a shop, Tony, would you get an air hose with a chuck at the end of it? A lot of stations now have a machine, or convenience stores have machines where you can put $1 in and you can fill your car up with air. They'll look kind of like this, but you will need, we still will need a gauge in order to do that. What you do is you just take this is a air chuck they call it, and you just stick it and you push it on there and you hold it on there and you let it go, and then you recheck the tire till you get your exact amount. If you put too much in, you just let it out a little bit, and then you kind of go until you get to the exact amount. So, thank you. Some people put, instead of air in a tire, you can put nitrogen in a tire. That's it's a gas, and what it does, it prevents temperature fluctuations. What happens with these tire pressure monitors, they become kind of a nuisance because when it gets cold out, air constricts, and it sets off your little light on your dashboard that says you have a low tire, and it's really not too low because it's just from the weather change. So what the manufacturers have developed is putting nitrogen in tires, which doesn't fluctuate. It doesn't constrict and expand with heat. It stays the same, and that helps what they call nuisance lights, where the lights come on where you really don't have a problem. The way you'll know if your tire's got nitrogen in the tire, the cap color. Tony, do you have those green caps? The nitrogen is A green cap means that the tire's been filled with nitrogen instead of air. Normally the caps are going to be black. They'll look like this. That's just regular air. That one's nitrogen. And then this one here is just a metal cap, and that would just be regular air. But that's another style. Instead of using the plastic, there's some companies put metal caps on there. So these two would be regular air, and this would be nitrogen. A lot of people ask if you can mix them. Will it hurt something? It won't hurt anything. It'll just lose its property. If you have nitrogen in a tire and then you add regular air, it'll lose its property. It won't hurt anything because the air that we breathe has about 70% nitrogen in it anyway. You just lose a little bit of the properties of nitrogen. Nitrogen's available at car dealerships and at some tire shops, and race cars use it, and it's got some good characteristics to it. It's not necessary, but it does help for if you want a little bit more extra performance out of your tires. The other thing on a tire you want to look for, we did talk about the size of the tire to make sure the car's got the right size tire on there. Every tire has got the size on molded into the sidewall. This tire is a 185, 65 by 15. Those numbers are going to be on the door jamb, and they'll be in your owner's manual. So if you get a used car and you want to be sure the correct size tire is on there, you want to verify that. Very important that whatever the manufacturer says that it was designed for, you want to keep that style and size tire. There's also a letter on here. It's called a performance rating. They're S through Y, and that means the sidewall strength. The higher, the lower the letter, like a W or an H, the sidewalls become a little bit softer so the car can handle better. The rubber is a little bit different. So whatever the manufacturer says came with the car, you just want to stick with that type of tire. The last thing you want to look for on a tire is something that every tire's got on there. It's like a birth certificate for the tire. It's called a DOT number, Department of Transportation. You'll see a bunch of letters and digits, and then you'll see a 4-digit number. The first numbers are where the brand of the tire and where it was built. The last 4 numbers are really what you're looking for, is that's the week and the year it was built in. This particular tire says 3315. That means it was built on the 33rd week of 2015. The reason you look at that is as your car ages and the car gets older, even though the tread looks good, if the tire is over 6 or 7 years old, the rubber deteriorates, rubber gets dry from the sun and the heat, and you want to replace the tire even if the tread looks good. That's why they put what they call date codes on tires. So anything over 6 or 7 years old, you want to have a tire professional look at it to be sure that it's still a good serviceable tire. And the other reason that these numbers are real important, if a manufacturer were to have a recall, they know how to contact you. When you buy new tires, if you were to go to Goodyear or Firestone or even the dealership, when you purchase your new tires, that number is registered with the NHTSA, which is the people who hold these records, the federal branch of the government. And then they put your address and your name and your VIN number. So if there's a problem with a specific type of tire, they can contact you and tell you to come to the shop and get the tire looked at for either recall or to evaluate the tire. So very important, that DOT number. Every tire has it on there, and the most critical point on that, it would be the date code, especially for people who have older or classic cars. You want to definitely look at that more often. So the next thing we'll move on to is I'll show you the decal on the interior of the door pillar so you can see exactly where to look for this information. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about the tire tread depth. That means how much tread is on your tire. A lot of people want to know when they should replace their tires. And there's some good average numbers that people look for when they look at a tire. There's two ways of checking a tire tread depth gauge. Obviously it's visual, but a more accurate way is something called a tread depth gauge. That's what I have in my hand. It measures how deep the tread is by this little tab that comes out at the bottom there, and then there's a gauge. This particular gauge, it's measured in 30 seconds, and it's color-coded also, which is real handy. It tells you what that means is green is good, yellow is getting close, and red is bad. And I'll show you how it works. Again, it's measured in 30 seconds. Just keep in mind a new tire is anywhere from 9 to 12, 30 seconds. And a tire where we start recommending replacements at about 5, 30 seconds is when you want to start really thinking about it. And when it gets down to 2, 30 seconds, it gets critically bad where you have to get it, for sure have to get it replaced. But you want to start thinking about replacing when the tire is at 4 to 5, 30 seconds. Even though you see a little bit of tread left on your tire, the problem is when the weather's real bad and there's a lot of water on the road, if you don't have much tread left, as you're going down the road, the water can expel from the side of the tires in these grooves because there's no grooves left. And that'll cause the car to hydroplane. Hydroplane means that instead of riding on pavement, you're riding on water. When you hydroplane and you turn the car, it doesn't turn. It keeps going the same way it went because you're not really riding on the asphalt. Very dangerous, very scary. So it's a good idea to replace your tires before they really get very low, just for general safety. So I'll show you now how to check the tread depth of a tire. So what I want to do is I want to stick this tread depth gauge, and these are available again at auto parts stores or online. They're called the tire tread depth gauge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gauge and stick it in between the tabs. I'm going to do it in several places to get an overall average, and stick it down, push down on it till it stops. Then I'm going to take it off and I'm going to read what it says on there. This particular tire was 7:30 seconds, so it's in the green. It means it's good. I'll take another reading. That's almost 8:30 seconds. So this particular tire is about half-life. It was probably 12:30 seconds when it was new. So we've got a good amount of mileage left on this tire. So this tire is in good shape. Another way you can check a tire, just as kind of a quick check. After you check it this way, you still want to have it looked at by a professional. But you can take a simple Lincoln penny and stick it in the tire tread upside down, with the face towards you, and you stick it in there, and you look at where from the side, if you can see his whole head, that means the tire is worn down. That means it's about 2 or 3 30 seconds. But if his head's covered up anywhere from his hair all the way down his head, the tire is still in pretty good shape. Now that's a real rough guide. I wouldn't use this as a science, but if you just want to generally know about where your tires are, you can stick the penny in there again, upside down, stick it in there and look at the side of it. If you can see his entire head, including his hair, the tire is worn out. So that's just another way of checking it. We did talk about some of the wear patterns on a tire. If you do see a lot of wear on the edge of the tire, you probably want to have your alignment checked. If you see a lot of wear in the middle, usually that's caused by too much air in the tire. And if you see wear on both sides of the tire, but it's good in the middle, that's usually not enough air in the tire, underinflated or overinflated. So any of those conditions can cause your tires to wear out quickly. So you want to check all that as you're evaluating a tire. All right, so we talked about how do you know the size of your tire and how much air to put in your tires. Every car has a sticker most of the time it's either on this pillar here or it's on the door itself, on the jamb of the door. This particular car, it's on the A pillar. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a couple things. You're looking at front, rear, and it gives you the size of the tire. P 185, 65, 15, 86H. So we confirmed that the tire size on this car was a 185/65/15 and it was an H rated. So we know we have the right tire on here. Next thing we want to look at is the pressure. It says 36 psi. It also gives it in metric, which we really don't need to know, but the standard that we use is the pounds per square inch. So it's 36 psi. So we know the front tires take 36, and then the rear tires are the same size. Some cars have different size rear tires. They're a little bit wider on some performance cars, but this car, both front and back are the same. And then also front and back, the pressure is 36 pounds, both front and back. So we know all the tires are going to be 36 psi. So we'll set that. Now, one thing I didn't point out is when you do check your tire pressure, you don't want to check it after you got off, been driving on the interstate cross country, and the tires are real hot. You want to check it after the car sits for at least 30 minutes if the tires are hot. So a good time to check your tire pressure is in the morning. After the car sits in the garage all night, when the tire's at room temperature. Again, if you remember, hot air, the heat expands the pressure, so you'll get a reading that'll be too high if you check them while they're hot. And the same says when they're cold. So you usually want to do room temperature when you check the air pressure, because your tire pressure monitors are very precise. And if you check them while they're hot and you add and you let air out, when the tire gets cold, it's going to be not enough air in the tire, and it's going to set your light off. So make sure your tires are at room temperature or close to it when you check the tire pressure. This also tells you the spare tire, the size of the spare tire, and how much air goes in the spare tire. You notice it says 60 psi. Those little spare tires they're called donut spares. They always take a lot more air. So very important here, and if the car happens to be missing this, you can consult your owner's manual. Now we'll go back to look at the actual spare tire and some of the tools that are associated if you were to have a flat. This is what they call a temporary tire, or a lot of people call it a donut spare. The reason they're called donuts is because they're small and they're not for use all the time. It's just to get you out of a pinch if you were to have a tire issue. These tires here, it says on here, temporary use only. Very important that you understand what that means. And it's got a T in front of the tire size, T 125/70/15. That means T, temporary, not to be used all the time. Sometimes you see somebody driving down the interstate with a tire like this and it looks like they've been on it an extended amount of time and they're going very fast. That's not what this tire is designed for. It's designed to get you back to a service center and get the tire replaced and get it off the car. It's not a tire to keep on the car permanently. You can go up to about 45-50 miles an hour top speed, and you can go about 30 or 40 miles on this tire. Any more on that can jeopardize your safety. If you remember when we looked at the door panel up by the door, it said 60 psi. So this tire holds more air pressure than a normal tire. So when you do your monthly checks on your tires, always be sure to check the air pressure in your spare tire. Nothing's worse than never checking your air pressure in your spare tire and you're having a problem and your spare tire is flat. It can be very frustrating. Always be sure to check the pressure in your spare tire. Some of the newer cars have a tire pressure monitor gauge on their monitoring system on their spare tire. This particular one does not. It's got just a plain rubber valve stem. So if this tire loses air, the computer in the car will not tell you that. So you have to check this one manually. Also, what you want to do, this also has a date code on there. This one says 3812. That means it was built the 38th week of 2012. These tires also dry rot, so they also have a life expectancy of about 7 years. So you definitely want to be sure to get that replaced if it's over seven years old, because they also will dry rot. Some cars come with a little compressor that you put in your power port, a cigarette lighter. If you are flat, you can fill up the tire with air. Those are handy to have. If they don't come with it, you can buy them at an auto parts store. Some cars do not come with a spare tire. When their tires are of low profile, they call run flat tires. If the tire loses air or gets a puncture, you've got about 50 miles to drive on a run flat tire before it tears up. So not all cars, sports cars, Corvettes and stuff, they don't have spare tires. And then some SUVs, Tahoes, pickup trucks, they have a full-size tire, and it's usually underneath the car, and it's lowered with a gear and a chain. So you want to always look on your owner's manual to be sure where your tire is located, how to get at it, and what I do on my own cars, and I have my children do, I make them check their tires and actually take the tire down and understand how to use it in case they were to have a flat, because a lot of times you're missing some of the tools, or get stuck, or there's a problem with the little mechanism, the ratchet that makes the tire go up and down, because a lot of the big trucks, they put it underneath the car way in here, and then there's a chain that pulls it up against the body, and there's a long rod you stick through to a little entrance hole, and you turn a little tool, and that after a while it gets rusty and it stops working. So it's always a good idea to check it frequently. And also to know where your tools are. The manufacturers don't have a lot of space in these cars anymore, so they put them in all kinds of places, behind the back seat, underneath you have to flip the seat up, and there's a special compartment. So just learn where your tools are. Usually you'll have a jack like this. You'll have a lug nut wrench that takes the lug nuts off, and then you'll have a little screwdriver for the hubcaps. And this also helps you when you turn this, allows you to turn this back and forth to raise the car up or lower it. If you were to have to use this kind of a jack, you want to go on a firm, hard concrete, asphalt surface. You don't want to go in grass, dirt, or mud, because it'll sink in as you jack the car up. And then if you got the car up, it could fall over, and it could kill you if you're underneath it. So real dangerous to use this. Make sure if you are to use something like this that you really know what you're doing, because the car can fall off these. They're not very strong, and they're kind of small. So it's very critical when you jack a car up to understand how to do it, and to have a solid surface, and understand where to put it as you jack up the car, because if you put it in the wrong spot, it could fall off, or it could bend some of the suspension parts. So just again, all boils back to reading your owner's manual, and to understand each manufacturer tells you to put it in a different spot and has different setup procedures. So I always go back to the manual, but you don't want to have to read it when you're on off the side of the road on an interstate in a bad area with the cars all around you when it's raining. You ought to know how to do all these steps before you have a bad situation. So, and if all else fails, call a tow truck, call AAA if you have AAA. You never want to do this close to the interstate, where you could lean back and a car could hit you. Try to get at least way off to the side of a shoulder, or get off an exit and get into a safe parking lot to do this, because it could another car could hit you, and oncoming traffic could hit you if you were too close to the road. So next thing we're going to look at is your wiper blades, and then we're going to look at the glass on your car. First thing on a wiper blade you want to look for is you want to make sure they're mounted tight, they're not loose on the actual wiper arm. The next thing you want to look for is to make sure that the rubber is still soft and not hard. It's pliable, and you also want to look to be sure it's not cut or nicked from ice. Usually can nick it, or just age can make them have little slits or cuts in it. It'll make the wiper smear and smudge and not wipe clean. This is very important to be able to have good visibility. This is what they call a beam type wiper blade. It's like a big piece of rubber. The older model wiper blades were what they call the frame type. It had metal and had a small piece of rubber on there. This is a much better wiping system, and if most cars come with this style, they call the beam style nowadays. If you still had the old style, the metal beam type, you can update any car now with this style wiper blade. It's a higher tech wiper blade. It's a better design, works better, lasts longer. I like to replace my wiper blades at least once a year. The sun dries the rubber out and it starts making a noise and skipping when it goes back and forth. A good policy is to replace them at least once a year during your annual service. Even if they're not ripped or torn, just go on and replace them. It's real important to get a good clean wipe so you have no problem seeing at night. Then you also want to make sure your windshield washer fluid, it's squirting water good. You can just check it and squirt water on your window from your washer system. If it doesn't squirt good, you may have some a leaf or debris covering up the little squirters, and you want to get that cleaned out. You can clean them out with a little pipe cleaner, or sometimes just brush them off because there's a little piece of debris have gotten and not allow it to squirt anymore. The other thing you want to look at is you want to look at your glass condition, the overall glass condition. Make sure it doesn't have any pecks on it, rock chips, cracks, splits. If it does have a little rock chip or a peck on it, you can get those repaired. Usually they run $25, $30 to get it repaired. If you don't get it repaired, it just kind of grows on there and eventually it starts splitting, and then you'll need to have your windshield replaced. So you want to make sure it's got no splits or cracks or any kind of bullseye type defects on it. And you also want to make sure it's clean, both on the inside and the outside, to be sure your visibility is always good. And then you also want to check your glass all the way around the car too, to be sure you have no chips or problems with any of the other glass. And another thing to do is to make sure you wash your car frequently. If you notice, sometimes you'll get splattered bugs and bird droppings on there. And tree sap. That stuff is very corrosive. If you leave it on there and don't take it off, it deteriorates the paint. Paint on today's cars, the clear coat is not as stout or as well made as it used to be because they've gotten away from a lot of the harsh chemicals that used to be in paint. So you need to make sure you maintain and take care of your exterior paint by washing off your car after you've been on an interstate trip and there's a lot of bugs, or you park under a tree and you got tree sap, because if you leave it on there for a long time and then you go to wash it off, you'll have little marks that'll break the clear coat, and sometimes they have to be buffed out, or in the worst case scenario, you'll have to repaint the car. And that'll hurt the value of your car overall when you go to trade it in or sell it. So a good thing is to wash your car at least once a week. And not only that, as you wash your car, you can see if you've got any kind of cracked lighting or any other problems you may be associated by having a clean car. So good idea to wash your car at least once a week. Okay, now we're on the interior of the car. We're looking at the dashboard. Every car's got certain lights that come on when you turn the key on when you drive the car. There's several different colors. There's a red, an orange, a yellow, and a green. Some of the ones you want to look for that are important is that one right there. That looks like half a tire. That's your tire pressure monitoring light. When that light comes on, that means the tire pressure in one of your tires is not where it should be, and you need to have the tires checked. And anything in orange or yellow means you have to check it at your earliest convenience. If it's red, like that little oil can or that battery or the brake light, that's an emergency. You need to get that looked at immediately, because that could be something dangerous where the engine could fail or you could damage your engine. So again, green is good, yellow or orange is a warning, red is bad. Pull over, stop, and get it looked at by a professional. And the other light, if you notice, is a check engine light. It's a picture of an engine. We all have those come on occasionally. When those come on, it's orange. It's not a vital emergency. It measures your emission control system. So you can still drive a car with that light on, but you have it looked at your earliest convenience. If that red little battery light comes on or that oil can light comes on, stop the car, pull over, and have somebody look at why those lights came on, because that could cause you a detrimental failure. So those are just some of the lights that you have on the dashboard that help you maintain a car in good condition.